Falcon 8X sat on the gleaming private runway of Denver Centennial Airport, its smooth silver body shimmering under the early morning light. The jet symbolized prestige, comfort, and absolute control, one of the crown jewels of SkyLuxe Charter's elite fleet. Inside, the crew moved silently, preparing for a cross-country flight to Boston. Everything about this flight had been arranged for efficiency and exclusivity. Every seat accounted for. Every detail is checked twice. Rachel Keene, the lead flight attendant, stood near the cabin entrance, clipboard in hand, her uniform tailored to sharp perfection. With over a decade in private aviation, she knew how to read passengers from a single glance. Her eyes were trained to recognize billionaires, diplomats, tech founders, and royalty by the shoes they wore, the timepieces on their wrists, and the way they carried silence like armor. That's why she tensed the moment she saw the woman walking toward the stairs. No entourage, no Louis Vuitton luggage, just a plain black hoodie, soft gray joggers, and a pair of worn white sneakers. The woman had earbuds in, a phone in hand, and her hair tied back in a loose puff. She looked around casually, then climbed the jet stairs like someone boarding a regional flight, not a multi-million-dollar charter. Inside the cabin, Jonas Park, the junior flight attendant, glanced up from the galley and gave a polite nod. He had already checked the manifest. 3 passengers. 2 were the elder couple already seated near the rear, repeat clients from New England. The third name, at the very top of the list, was Dr. Simone Avery. And that was her. Jonas stepped forward and offered a quick, respectful welcome as the woman entered, but Rachel had already crossed the aisle and planted herself in the woman's path. Behind them, the hum of jet power systems continued like distant static. The co-pilot gave a brief wave from the cockpit before returning to his pre-flight checks. Outside, fuel trucks rolled away and the sun crept higher. Dr. Simone Avery gave a small smile, barely acknowledging Rachel's presence, and moved to place her small carry-on in the overhead compartment. She didn't speak, she didn't hesitate, she didn't offer credentials, and she didn't need to. What no one else yet knew, not Jonas, not the couple reading quietly in the back, and certainly not Rachel, was that Simone Avery wasn't just a passenger. She was the reason this jet even existed. 3 weeks earlier, Simone had finalized the quiet acquisition of SkyLuxe Charter through her private holdings firm. The news hadn't been made public. Internally, only board-level leadership and key legal personnel had been informed. For everyone else, she was just another traveler, another well-connected client with the wealth to fly private. Simone liked it that way. She hadn't dressed for recognition. She hadn't brought security or made special requests. She had built her fortune in aerospace engineering, not fashion or ego. This flight was routine. At least, it should have been. Captain Mills, a tall, silver-haired veteran with thousands of hours in the sky, leaned his head out of the cockpit. He recognized the couple in the back but raised an eyebrow at Simone's entrance. Still, he trusted the manifest and Jonas's judgment. He disappeared again without comment. Back near the entryway, Rachel's posture stiffened. She glanced down at her manifest, double-checked the names, then looked back at Simone with barely veiled skepticism. There were no diamond earrings, no silk scarves, no sign of someone worthy of sitting in cream leather seats and sipping rare champagne before takeoff. Jonas stood silently by, observing the exchange with a sense of unease. Meanwhile, the couple in the back read their papers, but occasionally peeked over the edges, sensing the energy shift. Something was unfolding, something subtle, but sharp. And Simone, calm, quiet, perfectly composed, took her seat near the front of the cabin, plugged her earbuds back in, and began scrolling through her phone. No one said it aloud. Not yet, but the atmosphere had shifted. A question had entered the cabin unspoken. Who is she? Rachel didn't have the answer, but her instincts had already decided. And that, as it turned out, was going to be the beginning of everything. The cabin door had barely clicked shut when Rachel turned sharply on her heel and stepped back toward the seated woman. Her eyes were narrowed, her expression fixed with a kind of practiced poise that tried to conceal her mounting irritation. She stopped a few paces from Simone's seat, arms crossed neatly over her clipboard. "Excuse me again, ma'am," she began, her voice clipped and cool. "Before we proceed with departure, I'll need to see a government-issued ID. We've had security protocol updates and all non-frequent flyers are being re-verified." Jonas, who was arranging bottled water on the front galley shelf, turned his head at once. "Rachel," he said, measured but clear. "She's listed first on the manifest. HQ confirmed this charter twice." Rachel gave him a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I heard you, Jonas. This is a precaution." Simone looked up slowly from her phone, as though considering the request not with alarm, but with disappointment. "I believe you already have everything you need," she said evenly. Rachel didn't blink. "Just humor me. Standard protocol." "There's nothing standard about being singled out when your colleague has already cleared me," Simone replied, her tone still quiet, still calm, but unmistakably sharp. Jonas shifted uneasily, watching the interaction unfold with increasing discomfort. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He had seen this kind of thing before. Not always this bold, not this fast. But he recognized it. So did the couple in the back row. The older man had lowered his paper. His wife, quiet and composed, adjusted her glasses but said nothing. Rachel was undeterred. She leaned slightly forward, lowering her voice in what she imagined was discretion. "This aircraft is operating under a high-security charter, and you're wearing—" She gestured vaguely at Simone's clothes, her mouth twisting faintly. "Let's just say we've had situations before. People are trying to pose as clients. It's nothing personal." "Isn't it?" Simone asked. There was a pause, tense and unbroken. Then Rachel gave a small, deliberate exhale. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step off the aircraft until we can clarify your status with our command center." Jonas stepped forward now, eyes wide. "She's the top name on the manifest. There's nothing to clarify." Rachel ignored him. "I'm not comfortable proceeding without full verification. This isn't a commuter jet." Simone's voice did not rise. She simply said, "I won't be stepping off. I suggest you radio your command center again if you need assurance, but I'm not leaving this seat." Rachel's composure cracked just slightly. Her lips thinned. "I'm asking you to comply with a crew instruction. And I am declining because it's not a lawful or justified one," Simone said, "and because it's rooted in an assumption you've made about who I am based solely on how I appear." Jonas took another half step forward. "Rachel, I think you should let this go." But Rachel was already past the threshold of listening. Her expression turned sharper, her words colder. "You know what? I don't care who you think you are. This is a luxury charter. We don't get people in hoodies and sneakers walking in without credentials. You don't belong here." The words hit like cold water, but Simone remained still. Rachel leaned closer. "You can wait outside while we get this sorted, or you can be escorted. Your choice." "No," Simone said. Her voice didn't waver. "I'm not going anywhere." Rachel's face colored, and then, before anyone could move, she did something reckless. In one swift motion, her hand came up and struck Simone across the face. It wasn't dramatic, not drawn out, just a clean, open-handed slap, sharp enough to turn Simone's head slightly, loud enough to silence the entire cabin. The sound of contact hung in the air, followed by a stunned, awful quiet. Jonas froze, his jaw slack. The older couple stared in disbelief. Captain Mills, hearing the commotion from the cockpit, pushed open the cabin door and stepped out, scanning the scene with alarm. Simone didn't rise. She didn't flinch again. Her hand slowly moved to her cheek, pressing lightly against the spot where Rachel's hand had landed. Her expression didn't harden, but something changed in it, something so steady, so focused that even Rachel instinctively stepped back. "What did you just do?" Jonas asked, his voice low, tight. Rachel's lips parted. She was refusing to comply. She wasn't authorized. "She's the first name on the list," Jonas said firmly. "You saw it. You know that." Captain Mills stepped forward, voice calm but steely. "Is there a problem here?" Rachel turned toward him, trying to summon her authority. "Captain, I was attempting to de-escalate a situation with a disruptive passenger." Simone stood now, rising slowly to her full height. She was not imposing by stature, but her presence shifted the air. "I'm not disruptive," she said quietly. "I'm deliberate, and I told you I wasn't leaving. You assaulted me." The captain looked from Rachel to Simone to Jonas, then back again. "Miss Dr. Simone Avery," she replied, eyes fixed on Rachel. "And I think it's time the rest of you learned exactly what that means." The silence that followed was different now. No longer awkward or uncertain, but electric, charged with something irreversible. The moment had passed the point of apology. Whatever happened next, it would define the day. and destroy someone's career. Rachel didn't speak. She couldn't. Because for the first time she understood something that had never occurred to her before. She had picked the wrong woman, and now she was about to learn who Simone Avery was. Rachel's hand was still hovering in the air, her expression caught between defensiveness and disbelief, when Jonas stepped forward with urgency rarely seen in someone of his normally even temperament. His voice came out tight, as if wrestling with the weight of what he was about to say. "That's Dr. Simone Avery," he announced, addressing the cabin but fixing his eyes on Rachel. "She's the new owner of SkyLuxe Charter." The words hit the air like a thunderclap. For a moment, no one moved. Even the hum of the auxiliary power seemed to retreat. Rachel blinked once, then again, her jaw slackening but no sound emerging. Her lips opened slightly, as if a rebuttal might rise on instinct, but her voice failed her. All color seemed to drain from her face. The elderly couple seated near the rear of the cabin exchanged stunned glances. The man lowered his newspaper completely now, holding it forgotten in his lap. His wife simply stared at Simone, her brows high in disbelief. Captain Mills took 2 strides forward, a hand instinctively resting on the wall beside the cockpit. His voice, when it came, was calm and low but laced with urgency. "Can someone confirm that?" he asked, glancing between Jonas and Simone. Jonas didn't blink. "She's not only on the manifest, she's at the top of the ownership ledger. A holding group finalized the acquisition 2 weeks ago. She is that holding group." Captain Mills pulled out his phone without another word and stepped back toward the cockpit, calling the company line directly. His voice could be heard murmuring through the partially closed door as he began to verify what Jonas had just revealed. Meanwhile, Simone hadn't moved except to slowly lower her hand from her cheek. Her eyes remained focused on Rachel. Not in anger, not in vengeance, but in something far colder: control. She watched as the realization spread through the other woman's posture, the tightening of her shoulders, the slight tremor in her jaw, the way her feet shuffled just slightly backward without her meaning to. Simone turned without a word and walked back toward her seat. She moved with absolute calm, no swagger, no urgency, just the fluid, measured confidence of someone whose presence no longer needed to be justified. When she reached her seat, she sat down with care, adjusted the sleeve of her hoodie, and retrieved her phone from the side pocket. She didn't look up again. Rachel stood frozen in place, arms limp at her sides, eyes still trained on the back of Simone's seat. Her mouth opened again, but no words came. She turned slightly, as if to face Jonas, but found no refuge in his expression. He was watching her with a stare void of sympathy. From the cockpit, Captain Mills reappeared. He didn't say much, just one sentence, clear and direct. "Confirmed. She owns the company." No further clarification was needed. The line had been drawn. Rachel staggered back a half step, pressing her clipboard tight against her chest, as if it might shield her from the weight of what she'd done. No one said anything. Not Jonas, not the captain, not the couple in the back. A stillness settled across the cabin, heavy and absolute. The engines hadn't started yet. There were still minutes before departure, but the air inside the aircraft was thick with tension, the kind that clung to skin and thought alike, the kind that made every breath feel too loud. No one moved unnecessarily. No one offered an apology or explanation. Simone scrolled her phone with the same gentle rhythm as before. Her demeanor hadn't shifted. She didn't speak. She didn't seek a reaction. She simply existed, undisturbed, undiminished. Rachel turned away, eyes glossy, jaw set in stone. She walked toward the galley, her steps stiff and mechanical, each one echoing faintly against the cabin walls. Jonas returned to his post by the service station, organizing napkins that didn't need organizing, his back to her. The captain resumed his place in the cockpit and gave the call to begin pre-flight procedures. His voice was composed but distant when it echoed through the intercom. "Cabin crew, prepare for departure." Still, no one spoke. No one smiled. The couple in the back leaned closer together, whispering inaudibly. Rachel stood in the galley, breathing slow, deliberate breaths, her hands gripping the edge of the counter behind her. Simone remained where she was, one leg crossed over the other, head resting lightly against the headrest. Her face bore no visible anger, no smirk of retribution, only a quiet, unreadable expression. If she felt anything, she didn't show it. The Falcon 8X began to taxi down the runway. The only sound now was the soft mechanical murmur of the engines and the occasional metallic click of overhead compartments settling into place. It was the kind of silence that didn't offer peace, only weight. The kind of silence that said, everything has changed and we're not going back. There were no apologies. There were no explanations, only silence, and the hum of a jet preparing to leave someone's old world far behind. The cabin cruised in silence, save for the occasional ding of altitude notifications and the low murmur of airflow through the Falcon 8X's pressurized walls. Rachel sat in the jump seat near the galley, her posture rigid, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. Every few minutes, she would glance up at the overhead panels, then toward the corners of the cabin, scanning the places where discrete cameras were known to be mounted. The realization had landed like a delayed aftershock. SkyLuxe's jets were equipped with 24/7 recording for liability and security purposes. Everything had been captured. Every word, every look, every slap. Rachel's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. She tried to look composed, but her mind was spiraling. She had worked in elite aviation for nearly 15 years, climbed from assistant cabin crew to lead attendant on the most exclusive flights. She knew protocols, had memorized etiquette for royalty, for CEOs, for diplomats. But what she had just done, on camera, was indefensible. In seat 2A, Simone Avery sat still as ever, eyes closed, not asleep but contemplative. She hadn't spoken since returning to her seat. She hadn't requested anything. She hadn't once turned her head toward Rachel. And that silence, that unwavering composure, was louder than any confrontation ever could have been. About 40 minutes before landing, Captain Mills appeared once more in the cabin. His expression was neutral, professional, but there was gravity in his voice when he leaned toward Simone and asked softly, "Dr. Avery, may I have a moment of your time? The conference room is available." She opened her eyes, nodded once, and followed him without a word. The private room at the rear of the aircraft was lined in soundproofed panels, furnished in walnut and cream leather. A small table sat at the center, with secure tablet ports and an overhead screen linked directly to the company's executive communications hub. The captain closed the door behind them. "We've received notice from HQ," he said. "They're aware of the incident. Legal and HR will be on standby when we land." Simone listened without reaction, then opened a slim leather folder she had carried aboard. Inside were several printed documents, tabs, and annotations ions neatly in place. "Captain Mills," she said evenly, "this was never just about one person's behavior. It's about a structure that made that behavior seem normal." He nodded, listening. Simone continued, "I've spent the last 6 months auditing SkyLuxe Charter through my holding firm. We've reviewed personnel evaluations, crew retention rates, complaint logs, diversity reports, what little there were, and training documentation." She flipped to the first tab. "This is a complete overhaul plan. It includes a restructured onboarding curriculum, implicit bias training, leadership accountability frameworks, and a company-wide code of conduct." Captain Mills leaned forward, eyes scanning the documents as she turned the pages. "Rachel Keene will be temporarily suspended upon landing," Simone said calmly. "Not terminated. I want her enrolled in the Deep Alignment program. It's a full retraining path with psychological review, mentorship cycles, and peer evaluations." "You're not firing her?" he asked, surprised. Simone shook her head. "No, I'm not interested in humiliation. I'm interested in transformation, and if she's capable of growth, she'll get that chance." The captain took a long breath. "That's uncommonly generous." "It's not generosity," Simone replied, her voice low. "It's infrastructure. If I want the culture of this company to evolve, I have to start by proving people can come back from their failures if they're willing to do the work." She stood then, gathering the folder. "Let's not delay the landing. I want this implemented before the next rotation." Captain Mills nodded firmly. "Understood, Dr. Avery." When they exited the room, Rachel glanced up from the galley. Her shoulders straightened instinctively, but there was no mistaking the tremor behind her eyes. She had not been called into that meeting. She had not been spoken to. She had simply been left to sit with the weight of her actions, knowing the system was already moving around her. The descent began smoothly, with the intercom announcement delivered by the co-pilot in place of Captain Mills. As the plane dropped altitude over the Boston skyline, Rachel sat still and silent. She didn't try to make eye contact. She didn't speak to Jonas, who hadn't said a word to her since the revelation. When the aircraft rolled to a stop at the private terminal, a discreet HR representative and legal observer from SkyLuxe headquarters were already waiting at the foot of the stairs. As passengers disembarked, Simone was the last to rise. She took her time gathering her things. No one rushed her. At the threshold, she paused. Rachel stood to the side, clutching her tablet, hoping, maybe, for a moment of reprieve or some hint of absolution. But Simone didn't look at her. She didn't need to. Her message had already been sent, in structure, in silence, in presence. The HR representative approached Rachel, voice low but firm, informing her that she was being placed on administrative leave effective immediately and would begin an intensive ethics and conduct recovery program. No mention was made of the SLAP. They didn't need to. The system had seen it. The cameras had captured it. The consequences were already in motion. Simone stepped into the terminal and disappeared into a waiting vehicle. No press, no entourage, no statement. She left behind no scandal, only a precedent. And in her silence, she had rewritten every assumption made about her from the moment she stepped onto that plane. Everyone had seen what happened. Now they would see what came next. Following the quiet but transformative landing in Boston, changes at SkyLuxe Charter began to ripple outward with calculated purpose. Within 2 weeks, a new mandatory training module was deployed to every crew member, from ground operations to senior flight staff. The video introduction was simple. No dramatic music, no flashing graphics, just a softly lit shot of Dr. Simone Avery seated in a plain chair against a neutral background. She looked directly into the camera, calm and clear-eyed. Her voice was steady as she began. You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. You don't wait for a title to show decency. In this industry, especially in this industry, what we assume about others can become a barrier or a bridge. That choice is ours. Every day, every flight. There was a pause as the message settled. If your professionalism depends on status, it's not professionalism, it's performance. True service begins the moment you see people for who they are, not who you expect them to be. The words were not long, but they echoed throughout the halls of SkyLuxe's training centers. Shared across terminals, crew lounges, and executive boardrooms, the clip quickly became a talking point not just within the company, but across the high-end aviation sector. Meanwhile, in a quiet facility in Jersey City, Rachel Keene sat in a small training room, not in uniform, not standing behind polished galley counters, but dressed in a simple sweater and slacks. No makeup. No pretense. She listened, she watched, and for once, she didn't try to defend herself. This wasn't about salvaging a title or holding on to a job. She was there to face herself. And that was the hardest part. The modules were grueling. They forced reflection, called out unconscious bias, deconstructed how power is perceived and wielded in customer service. Rachel didn't rush through them. She took notes. She stayed after sessions ended, not because she was told to, but because the silence on that plane had stayed with her. Outside the company, news of the incident had sparked conversation across service sectors. Leadership blogs, training consultants, and even hospitality schools began citing the story. It was less about scandal and more about awakening, a quiet call to reevaluate how we treat others when we think no one is watching. Because sometimes the most powerful people in the room don't need to announce themselves. They're already leading by example. If this story moved you, share it. Leave a comment with your thoughts, subscribe for more, and don't forget to like the video. Respect starts with awareness. Let's make it universal.